Hello my gorgeous makeup loving friends. So I said I would do this video if and when Jeffree Star would issue an apology video, and he has, sort of. I'm reluctant to call it an apology video. And I said I would talk about it from the perspective of a psychologist. So for those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Teresa. I am a psychologist. Quick disclaimer, I am a behavioural psychologist. I primarily work with individuals with developmental disabilities, etc. But I am also a lecturer in psychology. So I have a sort of a broad overview of a lot of different topics in psychology. So I am looking at Jeffree Star's Doing What's Right video and talking about it from the perspective of a psychologist. I did something similar when looking at Tati Westbrook's and Shane Dawson's apology videos. I will link those down in the description boxes if you are interested. As per usual, I want to put out the disclaimer of I'm not giving any diagnoses. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not trained to give out diagnoses. So a lot of what I'm speaking on here are my opinion, my observations. And I think what's very important when I'm talking about my observations is that the reality is that what I have seen is what has been edited and selected to be put out to a wider audience. We're only getting a select snippet of what is actually going on behind closed doors. So I can't speak to any great degree on a lot of these things. It's just on what I'm saying. And again, you know, it's not me diagnosing or anything like that. These are just my opinions. Let's be super clear on that. But let's get straight into it. Do please subscribe. I have a little watermark thing here if you're watching on your desktop. I'm nice, I promise. So this all kicked off last night, so Saturday night in Ireland, probably Saturday evening, afternoon over in America. Sorry, my hair is doing weird things. And I was babysitting 3 young kids under the age of 7, and this 10-minute long video went live, and I was like, what's happening? Because I got a load of messages kind of going, it's happened, he has dropped a video, and I was like, excuse me? And I wanted to wait because I was watching the kids and making sure they were okay, but as soon as I had them to bed and I knew they were okay and relaxed, I ended up watching it. So I have since watched it a few times, and I have many pages of notes on my laptop in front of me. I have 3.5 pages of notes, Times New Roman, font size 12, because I'm APA, guys. That's how we format our things. Again, I'm going to try to be as objective as possible in this. It's very difficult to, but I will try. So I think actually when we're talking about this apology video, so the Doing What's Right, even though again I'm very reluctant to call it an apology video because, well, we'll get onto that in a little bit. It's very important to talk about it in reflection with his Never Doing This Again video from back in 2019. Because there's a lot of similarities between the two videos, not just in terms of the language. He's very dictatorial about this is what I'm saying is going to happen. This is the narrative that we're going to go with. He's even speaking in the same sort of tone. It's very measured. There's a lot of like pincery hand movements, which is interesting. It's like he's a claw from, like, you know, those games. And all I can think of is those little aliens from Toy Master. You know, we are being chosen, but there you go. It did feel a little bit like he had taken the script from this Doing What's Right video, that he had taken the script from Never Doing This Again back in 2019, and he did what some students do, which is thesaurus every second word. The content is still similar, it's generic, it's vague, the language, the tone is very similar. Like I said before, it was a 10-minute long video. I think it was like 10 minutes, 37 seconds, something like that. But there wasn't a lot that was actually said. There weren't any specifics, and it ended up being a bit of a fluff piece. Now, if any of my students had put forward something like this to me, I wouldn't have been very pleased because I had no idea what was going on. If you sat down and watched that video and you had no idea as to the specifics surrounding this, you would be completely lost. And I'll be honest, I was completely lost, and I know the specifics of what's been going on because I've been following this fairly avidly. So I showed it to my mother. I gave her no specifics about what was going on, and she said, but what is he apologising for? What's going on? What is this about? She had no idea. I thought there was some interesting body language going on. So he was posed in a very specific way. That was all very edited and very well thought out, like even down to the way that he was dressing. So his body language, he had made himself appear smaller. So he crouched himself down into a very small space to try and make himself look kind of vulnerable. Which again, it's trying to appeal to, oh, feel sorry for me. I'm not responsible. I'm a good person. And even his tone was very, very interesting because he was trying to keep it measured, but at times you could hear this exasperation and frustration, as though he was kind of like, why am I being made to sit down and film this? Why do I even have to justify what it is that's happening? Can I not just wander around and do what I want? It felt like this was a major inconvenience, and he seemed quite bitter. Part of why I think it was very staged was even things down to his dress. He was in a dressing gown. Well, why do we usually wear dressing gowns? Part of when we wear dressing gowns is when we're not feeling very well and we're lounging around the house and we're kind of going, je suis malade, feel sorry for me, take care of me. So again, that was another little attempt at making himself feel or look a little bit more vulnerable and feel sorry for me, etc. Because he wasn't going to cry in the video, so he had to come up with something. Interestingly, in the background of his video, you can see he's on this gold plush couch, which you're like, great, you have lots of money. That's very clear. But you can see the front door, which is massive. And I wonder if there was a certain amount of metaphor in there of this is a new door, this is a new chapter, we're shedding light on all of this, we are being open, we are being transparent. But not really. I maintain personally that I think this was very staged. Part of why I think that is, if you look at the video, it's still up. I was a bit concerned that he would take it down because, well, a lot of reasons. There are a lot of editing cuts, like where it jumps, where 1 second he's kind of sitting like this and then he's suddenly over here. So what happens in the interim between him being here and here? What has been said? What has happened? Why did they edit that out? There were a lot of those. Like I counted at least 15 jump edits throughout a 10-minute video. So again, this seemed very, very edited, and I wonder how much of that was down to legality, so trying to make sure that everything was very scripted so that nothing could come back to bite him. I thought it was really interesting as well that he kept saying and referring to it as the situation. Like I think he even used like the bunny rabbit ears, which by the way, that's what I'll always call it from a Friends episode where Joey's like, bunny rabbit ears. It's just stuck with me. He kept referring it to it as the situation. He couldn't even bring himself to verbalize exactly what it was, because there's a lot of stuff that he could potentially be talking about. He could be talking about the Davy Vanity situation. He could be talking about him posing with a Confederate flag. He could be talking about his racist past. He could be talking about the things he's done to James Charles. There's a lot that he could potentially be talking about. But it's basically left to the audience to infer what it is that he's talking about, which is kind of clever because he's trying to make the apology be a one-size-fits-all, which is quite funny because Patrick Star has come out with his new line called One Size Fits All. But it does feel like he's kind of like, this is a generic apology, do with it what you will, here you go. By him labelling it as a situation, it's him trying to minimise it. It's sort of like the equivalent of him saying, oh, this little old thing, it's not a big deal. So even just the language that he's using throughout the video is very interesting. this bit really annoyed me. This is one of the first points that I wrote down, and I have a lot to say about this. So he started to deflect by talking about Black Lives Matter. Basically, this was him kind of going, oh, well, what's going on over here in the beauty community, that isn't important. You should be looking over here at the whole Black Lives Matter movement and saying that there are bigger issues. He's basically telling people that they need to stop engaging in the beauty community drama. But that's only because that narrative kind of suits him, because he's been known to stoke the flames in the past. Like, he's been known to call people out and look for answers and be involved in the thick of the last 3 Dramageddons, this one included. Again, he's saying that the beauty drama needs to be put aside for bigger issues. And like, my response to that is, just because you have a broken leg and you're sitting next to somebody who has had an amputated leg, that does not mean that your pain from your broken leg is any lesser just because of the person next to you and their suffering. You can look at the 2 issues at the same time. It's not an either or situation. And the further thing that I would say is that his behaviour, the behaviour of the people that he has surrounded himself around, are actually a manifestation of quite a few of these issues overall. He's been known to do some very racist things, say some very racist things, make some very questionable choices. And when he started to bring up names like Breonna Taylor and other victims of racial abuse, and let's be clear, murder victims, it felt like he was using their names like they were a chess piece that he was using in play, that he was just using their names to kind of basically shout out, checkmate, I've won. You know, I am infallible, you can't come for me because I'm saying this. And he was using their names in a bid to save his reputation rather than actually acknowledging their loss, the injustice that was perpetrated onto them and their families. And given his history with racism, for me, I felt like him using their names was kind of gross, calculating, and in my opinion quite manipulative. Some of it as well, you could construe it as being gaslighting, because he was kind of insinuating that we as a community are being unreasonable for focusing on the issues that are at play here, with everything that's going on within the beauty community, because there are other issues in the beauty community. Him using their names and then talking about how he has used people of colour in his ad campaign since he started Jeffree Star. It felt like tokenism, deflection, virtue signalling, very much like, I can't be racist, some of my best friends are black. Like, oh God, like I felt embarrassed watching that personally. He said that he wanted to bring awareness, and I've done that before on my channel. I have put down links towards petitions. I have highlighted some black-owned beauty brands, and I'd say I don't think I've done enough, and I'm trying to do a bit more. But I would always say that words are words, and they can sound beautiful and sweet, but actions are much more important. He said he was trying to bring awareness to these things, but he was just using their names. There was no petitions to anything. There was no change.org, there was no charities, there was no information on books that could be read by people to help them understand why, you know, for instance, doing blackface is wildly inappropriate. Again, like I said, actions, it speaks louder than words. It felt like such tokenism. He, in my opinion, used their names and their murders as pawns in his own attempt at redemption. And in my opinion, there was a little bit of a white saviour attitude too when he was saying that he's advocated for brands that have had content stolen from them. That was very clearly a little nod towards the Beauty Bakery Huda situation from, was it about 2 years ago when he kicked up. Now, was that necessarily because it was a black-owned brand, or was it because he has a history with Huda Kattan and really not liking her? Quite possibly. It seemed to suggest him kind of bringing this up, that his actions alone are the catalyst towards inspiring change. He said, "I was the first and the loudest to speak up against a lack of inclusivity." Really? What about like influencers from the actual black community, like Jackie Aina? I'm pretty sure they said things before that. We have people like Patricia Bright, etc. They were saying things long before that. Or is it that they don't count because he has made some horrific racist comments towards them, particularly Jackie Aina, in the past? Check it out. I'm not going into it now. I don't want to repeat some of the things he said. It's gross and vile in my opinion. That statement, I was the first and loudest to speak against a lack of inclusivity, it just disregards the presence of black influencers on the platform and on other platforms. It's like saying, well, your voice isn't as important as mine. Like, the ego to state that from a white male who has all of the privilege that comes with that, it just, huge white privilege, in my opinion. And it was kind of galling for me to see. And it did feel like him bringing all of that up was very manipulative. And again, trying to point out like, oh, I couldn't possibly be racist because look at what I'm talking about. Look at what I'm talking about. Maybe that was why he was pictured recently with Black China as well. You know, I couldn't possibly be racist. I mean, what I found interesting was, you know, again, he kind of said, oh, I've been using people of colour, black models, etc. in my campaigns from the beginning. Yes, because you're a businessman and because you know that people would cry out about this, because this has been a thing that we've been calling out for the past 10, 20 years, that there aren't enough inclusive ranges, there isn't enough kind of faces out there representing the masses. We often see faces of people like me that are very, very white, you know, and that's fine for me, but what about people like Lupita Nyong'o, who has a very, very dark skin tone? Like, they aren't being represented. So he knew, like, he had to have people of colour in his advertising campaigns. He even had somebody in his cremated launch, which, oh my God, if you saw that video, it felt like, hello, look at my black friend. Yeah. But my question is, if he himself wasn't so problematic around, you know, accusations of racism, why is it that so many influencers dropped their affiliate codes with Morphe? We have Nicole Concilio, Jackie Aina, just to name a few. They dropped their affiliate codes with Morphe that they would have been making a lot of money on in protest of them holding his cosmetics and being in partnership with him with a couple of brands of cosmetics. And of course, we know now that Morphe have actually dropped him. Why would people like do that? Why would Morphe drop him if they didn't feel there was something to it? Because they would be losing a lot of money. He's made them a lot of money, but they're also losing a lot of money by having influencers drop out and not use their affiliate codes with them anymore. Why would the influencers do that unless there was something behind it? And this is something I want to point out. We only know so much because we ourselves are not in that community. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes. The likes of Nicole Concilio, Jackie Aina, etc., they do know what's going on. So when we see things like that, I think that's quite telling, in my opinion. I thought it was really interesting that he made a lot of little digs towards Tati. He used the phrase something along the lines of like, coming with receipts and we need to forgive. And he said that he's been reflecting on my behaviour and mine alone. Definitely some shade towards Tati, who, in my opinion, engaged in some shifting of blame within her video. Again, I talked about that in a previous video of mine. I'll link that down below. He said we all need to take accountability for our actions. And again, that was some additional shade towards Tati. And I would agree, we do have to take accountability for actions. I think that's really, really important. Not just as an adult, I would advocate that for the kids that I work with as well. His reference towards Tati's video is very, very interesting because he makes a claim that he stayed away from social media over the last couple of weeks. I think he said something like 6 weeks. Now, Tati's video came out in the last, I want to say 3 weeks. But obviously he's kept an eye out on things if he's able to quote from that video and make little references towards that. And frankly, he hasn't stayed out of social media. If you wanted to stay out of social media, you would have had your friends not have any content with you in it on their platforms. So for instance, he had Lipstick Nick and Cole Carrigan over at his house. They were like hanging out in the pool, and he like appeared in one of Cole Carrigan's little, I think it was a Snapchat or an Instagram video where he was like kicking his leg up in the air in the pool, being all like, I'm so unbothered by this drama, it's not affecting me at all. Like, okay, if you were really trying to stay off social media, you wouldn't even allow your friends to use your image with you. If you wanted to go full cold turkey, you could. Oscar Wilde, he also had over at his house baking cookies, which was so friggin' odd and strange. And Oscar Wilde actually said that Jeffree told him to put it up on his social media. So he's orchestrating this narrative. Like, he is, I think, still watching social media, because a lot of the things he's talking about are things that have been brought up in social media over the last couple of weeks. He's been very purposeful about what he's been letting trickle out. We have seen pictures with fans. We've seen him pick up a video, or not a video, we've seen him pick up a car from another influencer. He's been on social media, like he has, let's be real. Within his video, there is an element of superiority, and it does come off, in my opinion, as a bit pretentious, and it's lacking in humility, which is not what you want in an apology video. He does try to correct that later by talking about his origin story, which, by the way, using the phrase origin story is like, it's like he's a Disney villain or like a Marvel comic book character, which he says he's not a Disney villain, I mean, but there you go. But he says a lot of phrases like, let me tell you what's happening and how we're going to deal with this. And that's really very, very strategic language. He's trying to direct the focus of people away from what's going on. He's dictating what he wants people to do. And there's quite a bit of ego involved in language like this, that you actually do think that you could control millions of people who are watching this video and their actions of, this is what we are going to do as a collective. Like, I thought that was really, really interesting. The video very much is him saying that he's washing his hands of the situation. Like, oh, I've addressed this, I'm moving on, we're not going to talk about this anymore. And it's also very, very similar to his Never Doing This Again video. He had something similar where he was saying, like, let me tell you what we're not going to do in that video, which was very authoritative. And it's not an appropriate tone for a video where you are apologising. And what I would say is, given this repeated trend in his behaviour of him coming across with this very authoritative tone, this is what we're going to do, I'm telling you what it is that's happening, but then he keeps repeating the same mistakes, that's not an apology. An apology is only an apology if you look on a couple of months down the line and see if they're actually learning from their behaviour. It doesn't speak to any sort of real or tangible change with him. It's also very similar in a way to Shane Dawson's video. He claims that he's taking accountability, but he doesn't. He just ends up deflecting an awful lot. And one of the ways he tries to do that is he brings up that he has an issue around impulse control. This is where the psychologist in me steps up and kind of says, okay, but the thing around issues with impulse control is that those are spur of the moment decisions. They are not calculated. And a lot of what he has been accused of, such as the calculated takedown of James Charles, that was done over a period of time. That is not a spur of the moment decision. So impulse control, it doesn't bring you to the point where you're manipulating other people. If we're talking about impulse control issues, like as the DSM would characterize them, the DSM being the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual. We're talking about pathological gambling, we're talking about kleptomania, so that's like compulsive stealing, pyromania, so wanting to set fires, trichotillomania, that's where you're pulling out your hair, and intermittent explosive disorder. He may have a little bit of that, but the behaviour that he's, I can't even say apologising for, because he doesn't actually, it doesn't link in with an impulse control at all. Like I said, impulse control, it happens in the heat of the moment, and a lot of what he's talking about or alluding to was stuff that was very, very calculated, and it took place over a period of time, as was suggested by Tati. She, in her previous video, basically said this happened over a number of weeks, months, etc., where she was being gaslit. In my opinion, a lot more of his behaviours meet some of the diagnostic criteria around sociopathy or psychopathy, and I do have a video talking about some of the characteristics around that, so I will link that down below in my description box as well. My lord, like, we're only about halfway through. I apologise. He also started talking about lawyers and alluding to giving them information around receipts, but that wasn't entirely clear. But my question around that is, why wasn't that done earlier when he's had these receipts in his possession for a long time, at least a year, some of them? Are lawyers only being talked about because Tati brought them up in her video? Again, that's further evidence that he has been checking out social media. He says in that video that he would never keep receipts on people to sabotage them. But this is very contradictory, because there's actual video footage of it. You can find it anywhere. It's from one of his Snapchat videos where he says something along the lines of, nobody in the beauty community will cross him because I've got dirt on everyone, so they know not to cross me. Which is it? Is it that you do or you don't? Because you've literally said this. It's very, very confusing. Or is him talking about lawyers being involved, is that because Tati is actually pursuing an actual case and he's having to go on the defensive with that? As I kind of alluded to before, it's an apology video, but it kind of isn't. He doesn't specify what he's apologising for. He does say sorry to James Charles, but it's not clear what he apologised for. If, for instance, James Charles really had the allegations against him that Jeffree was claiming around sexual abuse, like, let's be real, that's a huge thing. Why would you apologise to somebody like that if you were pretty confident that they had done this? Because he said he had voice notes on this, and it was only back even in April that he was still talking about these voice notes, which I'll get back to in a little bit. If he wasn't sure of the truth around these particular voice notes, why did he even bring it up in the first place? Why did he show it to so many people? I mean, you really wouldn't want to tell Jeffree anything confidential, would you? He'd be a terrible psychologist. Like, confidentiality, anonymity, Jeffree, it's very important. It's not clear of an appropriate apology, because one of the things you have to do when you apologise is specify what you did wrong. When I am working with small kids, and I do that from time to time, and if they've done something wrong and they have to apologise, I make it very clear that they have to state why they are apologising. So what is it that they did wrong? And part of why you do that is that they can pinpoint the behaviour that they did and make sure that they don't do it again. So this is the thing that I am apologising for. These are the actions that we're going to do going forward. That's what an apology is. What you did wrong, what you're planning to do to address that. And what I would say is, you know, I wonder if he didn't explicitly apologise and state, well, this is what I'm apologising for, because there could be legal proceedings in play. And if you say, this is what I'm sorry for, that is taking accountability, taking blame, and straight away that has like a legal ramification. But in my opinion, I think if you are apologising for accusing James Charles of predatory behaviour, you need to say it. Because the stuff that was said against James Charles at that time, that was criminal allegations. That was stuff that looked towards destroying his career. I mean, he could have lost his life because there was suicidality involved. But quite frankly, looking at that video, for all I know, for all the rest of us know, Jeffree could have just been getting on camera to apologise for calling him Jimmy instead of James. It's not clear at all. Another note of what I find interesting was he said that society now expects people to answer immediately, but that he wanted to take a step back and evaluate. And that's totally fine. I would actually agree that you shouldn't ever do things in the heat of the moment. You should actually take some time to reflect, to think about things. And he's using a lot of those buzzwords, by the way. But the problem is he has painted people as being unreasonable for looking for an answer. And I find that funny and a little bit hypocritical, because if we look back at the original Dramageddons, he was pushing for responses from Laura Lee when she came out with a makeup video after the allegations of her racism, etc. And he went on like what can only be described as a Twitter tirade saying, imagine putting up a video where you're doing your makeup and not addressing this. He even had like a very passive-aggressive tweet saying that silence speaks to your guilt. So, like, which one is it? Again, I know your opinion can change over time, and I think that, demonstrates growth, but in this case, I don't think it's one of those. I think it is, this is the narrative that I have right now, and going along this particular narrative happens to suit me at this particular time and place. It just seems like such an abrupt sort of a jump in terms of opinions, and it's quite inconsistent. Like, how could you have changed that much in your opinion in less than a year? Like, if I remember correctly, there was a Snapchat video where he was, I mean, the only way that I can say it is maniacally laughing. Like, it was frankly a bit disturbing to watch. He was like, ha 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 ha. Like, it was full on maniacal laughing, and it ended the video with him saying, I love karma. I think that was from the first Dramageddon. Like, why is there so much drama? It's so ridiculous. These are grown-ass adults. But this might be where the whole Disney villain image is being summoned up, because that is the most Disney villain thing. It felt like he was like laughing away in his castle just while the thunderclouds loomed, just going, oh, 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 oh. It was very theatrical, very dramatic. But the thing is, that is part of how he's actually choosing to portray himself. As I said, he said he's trying to engage in self-reflection, but in order to do that, you need to acknowledge what you've done. In order to change, you need to acknowledge what it is that you've done wrong, but he hasn't done that. He hasn't said what he did wrong. It's unclear what exactly he's apologising for. In fact, in my opinion, the purpose of the video is unclear, outside of an attempt at the very end to kind of shill some products and essentially save his reputation. As I said before, you need to be specific about what it is that you've done wrong. When you're apologising, you pinpoint what you've done wrong, and you make some changes in your behaviour to make sure you don't do it again. The thing is, last year he sort of apologised, saying, never doing this again, never getting myself involved in drama. Great. Fantastic. But the thing is, less than a year on, he was still inserting himself into drama. He went on to Jeffree Star's Basement, which is a podcast, in April of this year, so less than a year on after his initial apology video, and he brought up this alleged voice note again. He was bringing up the drama again. So an apology is only valid if you see growth and change from it. Again, we didn't see growth and change from the 2019 video. This is what makes me very reluctant to say that we're going to see growth and change from him going forward. I do think when we're talking about the whole Jeffree Star podcast, it was very interesting that he decided that he would talk about that then, the alleged voice note, because that happened to coincide with some drama that he was embroiled in himself, and it seemed very much like he was trying to deflect from that. Now, the drama in question is, of course, the whole Davi vanity and the extent to which he knew or did not know what it was that was happening around all of that. So It was basically an attempt to kind of go, look over here, there's people that are worse than me, don't question me about my involvement in that particular case. I thought as well what was interesting was he said that he was gassed up behind the scenes. By who? That was really confusing. And again, it seemed like it was another reference towards Tati's video, because again, she kind of said that she was gaslit by Shane and Jeffree to the point that she made her Bye Sisters video. Maybe he's kind of saying that it kind of worked for her, so he's trying to use the same sort of strategy. But my question is, who on earth would have gaslit Jeffree? The thing is, who would have gained from that? When we're looking at the likes of Shane and Jeffree, they had a lot to gain from it. Shane saw James as being a threat because he was potentially coming out with a documentary. Jeffree saw James as being a threat because he was starting to outstrip him on social platform, and he actually has. He is 20 million subscribers in on YouTube. Jeffree has 17.5 million. He's lost another 100,000 in the last 24 hours. Very interesting. They had vested interest in bringing James Charles down. So who was it that was being gaslit? It felt a little bit like he was trying to bring the blame back towards Tati, so making it out like she's said things. So it reads a little bit like oh, but she hit me first, kind of a childish argument going back and forth, which is fine. But the thing is, the heart of the whole thing is actually really very, very serious. The allegations, like I said, they were criminal. The consequences were major and potentially life-threatening. And the lack of accountability is still very much present. And we're still at the he said, she said stage, which is insane. And I don't think we'll really know much going forward unless there's actual legal proceedings. I found it interesting that on this video, he initially had the comments turned on, but after a series of very negative comments, he turned them off. He's not willing to hear any feedback. He is surrounding himself with an echo chamber, even down to his friends. Like he was saying that, people are pointing out that I don't have friends in the beauty community, but that's because they are toxic. And, well, he didn't say toxic, but he said something along those lines. And I have true friends. Do you, though? Or are they just being paid by you? Do you have friends that you aren't paying, or that they're not getting something out of that friendship in a financial, monetary kind of a way? But the thing is, he says that, the people in the beauty community, they're fickle. But the thing is, they wouldn't be depending on him for anything because they would be quite self-sufficient. They don't need him for money. They don't need him for press, for PR, etc. So it seems very much like he doesn't want a relationship of equals. He likes to be the superior person. He likes to be on top. It's again quite contradictory, because he said in his video that if he's not holding himself accountable, that he wants people to point it out. Great. How do we do that? Because you've turned off the comments and you're deleting comments on Instagram. I mean, Twitter is the one place, but you're just completely ignoring all of that. So again, this is a case where actions speak louder than words. Your words are saying, I want to take accountability, and if I'm not doing that, can you please let me know? But you're not listening. You're not listening. He uses the phrase, of course I did, a few times, and to me this is very telling. It's almost dismissive. Like, I use that phrase an awful lot of times when it comes to purchasing makeup. Like, people will say something like, did you get this palette? And I'll be like, of course I did, because I have a fucking problem. Sorry, shouldn't have sworn, but there you go, whatever. It was never meant to be a video for kids anyways. But him using that phrase, of course I did, it's again saying that he's not responsible, that it was like, this behaviour, it was an automatic response to engage in the drama, and that it should be written off. Like, oh, I can't be responsible. It's a reflexive reaction, the same way that if you blow a puff of air into my eye, I'm going to blink. I couldn't help it. It's automatic for me. And this again suggests that it's not a behaviour that he's actually trying to get under check. So again, it's just shifting away that accountability. He talked about Shane, and Shane not potentially liking him how he was 10 years ago, and he wouldn't have liked Shane from 10 years ago, because of, the things that were surrounding their past. But the question is, how have they changed? Like, how have they changed in the last 10 years? I think it's more that they've gotten very good at hiding a lot of their behaviours and editing themselves and portraying themselves in a certain way to their public. How has Jeffree changed? What evidence is there of that beyond his virtue signalling? Beyond him bringing up Breonna Taylor's name in a video, which honestly, did not sit well with me. He doesn't say like what he's done to change or what he's trying to do to change. It's just self-reflection. Self-reflection. Okay, that's great. You have to self-reflect. But what have you got from this? He says that he and Shane got caught up in the shit of the drama. But he doesn't say what that entailed. And again, it's just so vague and it's open to interpretation. It's one of those one size fits all. You can take whatever you want from this video and it should pacify whoever is watching. It's not an actual apology, and it's certainly, in my opinion, not doing what's right. To do what's right, you need to specify your behaviour and formulate a plan of change, in my opinion. And saying that you got caught up in the drama, I mean, okay, but how? How did you get caught up in drama if you're the one who is instigating it? If you're the one who is bringing up voice notes and gaslighting people behind the scenes? Again, it's kind of pointing to there was somebody else. Who is this somebody else? Who is this shadowy figure lurking around the background? Is it you, Manny? I'm joking, I can't see Manny being involved in any of this. Again, it's just him passing on the blame. I thought it was really funny that he tried to be relatable at various points. Again, bringing back to his origin story. I was homeless, I worked in a mall. All while sitting on this plush gold couch wearing Louis Vuitton slipper socks. The juxtaposition was really interesting. And I think part of why he was doing that was also to kind of have this, I suppose, sense of, you could accomplish this too. Look at all that I've achieved, and you know, I am self-made and you should admire me. Like he's trying to put himself out as being a figure of admiration. We're near the end, guys, don't worry. Ultimately, he ended the video talking about Jeffree Star Cosmetics and the new launches, because August apparently will be a big new release month, which I will end up probably talking about in my new makeup releases videos, which I posted today on a Sunday. So yeah, do check that out. They're good, I promise. So the apology felt a little bit like it was a shill. The same way that we accuse Jaclyn Hill, and she gets so much shit for it. And I'm wondering if this is the whole dynamic of males versus females in the beauty community, that a male can get away with something that a female can't. Jaclyn got absolutely dragged for coming up onto YouTube and doing a video where she's apologising, but then at the end kind of shilling her products. But Jeffree's done the same. He's done the same. Why is it okay for him and not for her? It's just really, really interesting, just the blatant sexism that we see within the community. The things that a man can get away with that a woman can't. When it's interesting that it's a community that is very much put towards, it's female driven. Like a big chunk of people who buy beauty products are female, but some of the ones who are at the top are males. And a lot of like the companies, like the big mainstream brands, are headed by white men. Very strange. So he's telling people to stop engaging in the beauty community drama. But that's only because that's the narrative that seems to suit him at the moment. That's it. And he's trying to shill stuff because he's already seen from his lip liner launch that happened a little over a week ago, nothing sold out. Nothing sold out. It's still completely available. I think a certain amount of this was also damage control, that he put, you know, that little launch out to see how much of an impact all of these events were having on his business. I think that was very calculated, that he was trying to see how that would go and he was waiting for the day to come in on that. Was this an apology video? He did say the word sorry in it, so it technically qualifies, but I would say that you can only classify it as an apology video if you look on his behaviour over the coming months. Has he changed his behaviour? We look at James Charles's behaviour from last year, and he had an apology video, and he has changed his behaviour. He is probably, in my opinion, the most mature individual involved in all of this kerfuffle. I like using the word kerfuffle. It's just like, ugh. It felt very much like he put this video out for his diehard fans just so that they could have something to point to be like, look, he's already apologised, what more do you want? Can you just move on? Stop telling him to do something, you know, how many times can he apologise? And what I find interesting about that is they're usually white people. You can't accept his apology. I can't accept his apology in terms of racism because it doesn't affect me. And it would just be so inappropriate of me to do so. Ultimately, in my opinion, everything that went down should have never been public. This should have never made it out towards us. This was stuff that should have happened behind the scenes. It should have been a sitting down, having coffee, having a chat and having it all out. None of this should have been internet fodder. It was wildly, wildly inappropriate in my opinion. But that is it. That is my entire thoughts on that particular 10-minute long video. And I don't even know how long this video is going to be. Do please like, comment and subscribe. It helps me out massively. I'm a tiny channel. I'd love to get towards monetization, but in order to do that, I have to have 1,000 subscribers. And I don't have that. It's very sad. I may do more of these commentary style videos. I'm starting to get a little bit more like comfortable with it. My channel is a mishmash of lots of different things. It's new makeup releases, it's me playing with makeup, it's psychology videos, it's makeup and murder. It's just a whole lot of things. My new thing is bad makeup science, where I'm testing out weird makeup and seeing the claims and whether or not it lives up to it. So do please check me out. I promise I'm lovely. And yeah, check out the videos that I've put in my description box. They will explain a certain amount of the things that I've been alluding to as well. I just didn't want to repeat myself. Do please share, because sharing is caring, unless of course it's an STD, in which case, you know, wrap it up. Don't be gross. Use a condom, please. Or a prophylactic if you're very fancy. But that is it. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.